Welcome to the show where we expose new perspectives on our ever-evolving world through the lenses of various industries, cultures, and backgrounds. Our guests are disruptors, united by a common goal to bring their purpose to life. Whether they're from the commercial world or third sector, from the global north or the global south, expect an inspirational journey that will transform your perspective on just what is possible. My name is Philippa White, and welcome to Thai Unearthed. Hello, and welcome to episode 83 of Thai Unearthed. Now, as many of you know, I lived in Thailand for a little while I finished my business degree. Now, without question, Thailand touched my soul on an extraordinary level. And as a result, not only are a handful of the stories in my book from my time there, but the experience was also a contributing factor to inspiring me to set up my company, Thai, almost 20 years ago now. Now, this is why it was such a pleasure to connect with Lucy McCray, CEO at The Freedom Story. The Freedom Story is an organization that works to prevent child trafficking in Northern Thailand. And since Lucy was old enough to know what trafficking is, has been on a mission to prevent abuse and exploitation before it happens in a holistic way. In her role as CEO of The Freedom Story, she helps connect those with a passion to prevent children from experiencing exploitation with those who are vulnerable and in need of support. Today we hear about her story and how she got to working with the organization, the reality on the ground in Thailand, what challenges young people face, but also what is happening to ensure thousands of young people have a better future. The work they do is incredible, and I'm so honored to have been able to tell just a bit of their story. So now throw on those running shoes or grab that favorite beverage, and here is Lucy. Lucy, it is so great to finally meet you because we've been exchanging emails for a little while and over the Christmas holidays. So finally, this is happening. It's great to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. And it's great to meet you too.
So I like asking this question. I ask it at the beginning of every podcast. Where are you right now?
I'm calling in from Chiang Rai, Thailand. So the northernmost province in Thailand borders Myanmar and Laos over here in Asia.
How long have you been there?
I've been living in Thailand for about 8.5 years now. In Chiang Rai, 6 and a bit years. And I did about 2 years in a bigger city down the road called Chiang Mai.
I would love to just understand a little bit about you before your involvement with The Freedom Story. Your accent's obviously not Thai. You don't look Thai.
Yeah, totally. So I grew up moving around a lot. I'm a dual citizen of the US and the UK. So I spent my childhood kind of bouncing between those two countries. We also lived in the UAE for a little bit in Abu Dhabi. We lived in Malaysia a little bit. So, you know, as a very young child, I spent a lot of time moving around to a lot of different places and cultures with my family. But I was based in the US, just outside Washington, D.C., from the ages of 8 to 16. So most of my kind of formative adolescence, I guess, was spent in the US. So that's where my accent comes from. And then at 16, we moved back to the UK. I did my undergrad and my master's in the UK before I moved out here to Thailand.
I'm guessing your parents were diplomats?
Oh, it's a great question. Yeah, it's a good guess, actually. It's a very common guess. My dad worked for a defense contracting company. And my dad actually he's American, but he grew up in the UK. So sort of on that side, the third generation of Americans living in the UK. So.
Yeah. Wow. No, I mean, I ask because obviously I live in Brazil and my children are Brazilian. I am very integrated into the life in Brazil. I would not say that I live my life as a foreigner living here, but I do have a number of friends who do come from other countries that live here. And many, of course, are diplomats. And so, you know, a couple of good friends of mine have gone through the foreign service of the US, actually. And so they've been consul general or whatever the positions are here. And so it's just interesting seeing their life from an outsider, you know, and having their kids doing exactly that, going to the American schools in all the different countries around the world. And I just think, wow, you know, my partner's also a sailor. And so he sails internationally. And through his life, we meet so many interesting people also who are, taking their kids around the world sailing for 3 years. And you just think, God, these children are so resilient and so adaptable. And it's fascinating just seeing that. So you're clearly one of those ones who've had that amazing opportunity, really. I mean, there's pros and cons, I'm sure.
Yeah, it was amazing. And I think adaptable is a great outcome from it, for sure. It's funny, somebody described me as, a classic third culture kid somewhat recently. And I was sort of scoffed and was like, no, I'm not a third culture kid. And then my family has been living in the UK for 15 years. They're actually moving back to the States. And I realized, oh, that really feels like home. And then moving back to the US feels like a really big deal. And I was like, oh, wow, okay. Even as an adult, you do actually have some of those lingering third culture things in there, even when you don't realize that you're that much of a TCK or a third culture kid. So
totally.
But yeah, it's amazing. People always worry about, it's going to mess up the kids, but I've found it to be a very powerful and positive experience. So.
Well, and it's really nice to hear that. My book that I very briefly mentioned to you, it's called Return on Humanity, Leadership Lessons from All Corners of the World. And it comes out in April the 23rd. But I do talk about what I do through the work that we do is we help develop the human competencies that I think are necessary for leadership and to create more human companies, but also more leaders that are able to tap into those human assets that create better companies and better leadership. It is resilience. It is adaptability. It is flexibility. Those competencies are absolutely fundamental for good leadership. And I do use these examples of, a family sailing around the world. And if children have the opportunity to be flexible and adaptable and kind of learn that resilience at a young age, it does stick with you as you get older because you are a little bit more, fluid and you're not completely stuck in your ways. And I think that that's absolutely vital. And the fact that I also see it as a huge plus. So a huge gift that your parents gave you, I think. Talk to us about the freedom story because you're obviously a hugely inspirational person. You've lived all over the place. You've had many opportunities and it's fascinating to understand what is the freedom story and then how did you get involved with the organization?
So I'll actually answer the second question first, if that's okay. So moving around a lot, I had kind of, I think, a bit of a global perspective. I can remember being, I would have been maybe I'm going to age myself, but being about 14 when the tsunami hit Southeast Asia just after on Boxing Day, I think in 2006 happened. And I think that that's something a lot of people connected with at the time because there were Westerners on vacation and, it was such a huge tsunami and it was right after Christmas and just many different things I think came together for it to be really impactful for people. But I remember feeling very impacted by it. And then being based in the US at the time, it was right around the time that there was, Hurricane Katrina and things like that as well. So I was growing up and becoming very aware of inequality and kind of how your circumstances of your birth will really dictate a lot of your life path and kind of was wrestling with that. And in high school, heard about trafficking for the first time and heard about kids that were being exploited around the world, people that were being trafficked in our supply chains and in all kinds of industries, and was kind of immediately horrified by that and kind of decided at 16, 17 that was what I wanted to do with my life. And at the time, I feel like the only options for people to sort of fight trafficking, quote unquote, were to become a human rights lawyer. So that's my path forward, is the only way to engage. And I sort of told everybody that, and everybody in my life was like, oh, that's so nice, but I don't think that's actually what you're going to end up doing. And, I'm pretty stubborn. So I was like, that's what I'm going to do. Just watch me do it. And they actually ended up being right. So I didn't end up pursuing a law path. I ended up pursuing more of an international development path, got my master's in international development to kind of gain a wider perspective on, what are all the different things that come into play in the lives of folks that are experiencing poverty or people that live in the majority world. What are the paths that different countries and states have taken to development and things like that. I finished that and I was, I had lived abroad quite a bit and I had moved a lot, but I had never lived abroad on my own. And so I wanted kind of international experience. I came over to Thailand with a large anti-trafficking nonprofit called International Justice Mission, or IJM, and worked with them for 2 years, helping kids who had been sexually abused to hold their perpetrators accountable and to get kind of the healing and emotional support that they needed to heal from those experiences, as well as helping ethnic minority people here in Northern Thailand. They're called Hill Tribe people who are stateless to get documentation. And it was my first time ever really dealing with or seeing statelessness and, what that was, and wrapping my mind around the fact that people can be born in a country but not have citizenship in any country in the world. And if you don't have citizenship in those countries, there's no country then that's going to guarantee your rights. And I loved working with IJM. They're a huge organization. It was a really good experience. But after about 2 years, I had met, a number of different clients and a number of different people in the programs, and was starting to really wrestle with this idea of what does it look like to prevent these things from happening, to prevent abuse from happening, to prevent exploitation and trafficking from happening. And is it possible to actually prevent trafficking? I think trafficking is often portrayed in the media as almost random, like almost random kind of kidnapping. People are kind of kidnapped and taken, but that's often not the case. People are often targeted by traffickers because of their vulnerabilities. So I actually found Freedom Story around that time. And Freedom Story is really focused on answering that question of, is it possible to prevent trafficking? So we work with children and young people that are vulnerable to trafficking in Northern Thailand. And just like traffickers know who to target because they're vulnerable, we know who to target because the risk factors and the vulnerabilities to trafficking are fairly well known and fairly established in this corner of the world anyway. So we work with these young people to provide them essentially other opportunities to help them to stay in school, to provide mentorship and adult relationships that will help them kind of have stability in their life. We do human rights education to help them know their rights and access their rights. So, what are your rights with various legal statuses or statelessness, and what are your rights as a child? What are your rights as a migrant worker? And then also helping families earn more income through kind of a sustainable income program where we help them, raise chickens and raise fish so that they can have a little more income and become essentially financially independent in the long term. And we've been doing that here for 15 years. I joined the team about 6 or almost 7 years ago now.
It's fascinating. We have similar issues here. Brazil has a huge problem with trafficking. If I'm not mistaken, Rachel Sparks, is she the one who set up the organization? And was there a film made about the Freedom Story? Is that?
Yeah.
And so what is just, I'm curious just about how she set up the organization and where that all kind of came from.
Sure. Back in 2008, Rachel Sparks was kind of set out to make a film about trafficking. If you can kind of remember back in 2008, that's kind of when trafficking was first bursting onto the scene as kind of an issue. That people were talking about in kind of mainstream media and things like that. So she came over to Thailand to make a film about trafficking. And in the course of making that film, I actually met the Thai man that would go on to become the co-founder of Freedom Story. And he said, I never had like a word to put to this phenomenon of trafficking, but the girls from my village are experiencing that. So I can take you back to my village to meet people that this is happening to and to meet people that are vulnerable to this. So they actually came from Bangkok up to Chiang Rai and met a young girl named Kat and made a film about Kat and her family. And that was what, originally it was just supposed to be a film, but they basically saw that Kat was really vulnerable to trafficking for many different reasons. And off the back of meeting her and making that film, they saw that if Kat could stay in school and access more education and have the support she needed, she could have other options and she wouldn't be trafficked and she could go on to, pursue whatever career she wanted. She had so much potential. She just needed a little bit of support. Yeah. So actually another Rachel joined with Rachel Sparks, and Rachel Goebel and Rachel Sparks and Tawi, our Thai co-founder, all started Freedom Story in order to give Kat and at the time 20 of her friends from the village the first group of scholarships that we provided. Yeah. And that was 15 years ago. So Kat actually
Where's
is
Kat now? What's Kat doing?
Yeah. She's amazing. She's doing her master's in administration. She was working as a teacher for a couple of years and then decided she liked teaching, but she thought she might want to be like an administrator. I went to her wedding a couple of years ago. She's really an amazing young woman, but she's thriving and has taught us so much. We actually used that film, which again, if you think, back to 2008, it was a total different paradigm. It was a totally different way of talking about development. And Kat, when she turned 18, we asked if we could put that first film online, publicly available online. And Kat at the time had been receiving support from us for almost 10 years. So you can imagine there's a lot of different dynamics at play. And Kat actually said no, which was incredible. And so it opened up this opportunity for us to ask, can you explain why? Like, what are you thinking? And she basically said, that film is about me and it's about my mom and my family. And if you watch the first film on its own and there's no follow-up or you don't know anything else, there's a lot of assumptions and a lot of places you could jump to in terms of what happened to Kat, which are not true. you could assume she ended up trafficked or she ended up exploited. And in reality, that wasn't her path at all. And so she said, I don't want people to only think of me as that little girl in the film. And so that actually helped us to launch kind of a parallel project that we have, which is called ethical storytelling, which is just a passion project really of ours, where we want to help other people to learn how to do nonprofit storytelling or sort of social good storytelling better.
Yeah,
I think so. We've relied on that kind of pity-based marketing, or I'm going to make you feel bad and therefore you're going to, give me money and I can do good stuff with that money for far too long. And, it's exploitative of people like Kat, but it's also exploitative of our sort of donors and supporters, right? And exploiting their goodwill and their desire to help. And so how can we tell stories that are more dignifying to everybody involved?
Absolutely. And I mean, just also having worked in the international development area for so long, it's interesting how that move has happened globally. And it should, because anyone needs to be so careful with how words are chosen and how stories are chosen, even for ourselves. You might be an anxious person. And if you keep telling yourself that you're an anxious person, or if your family keeps telling you that you're an anxious person, then you sort of create that story for yourself. And actually, if you tell stories that are rooted in empowerment and rooted in opportunity and rooted in hope or just potential, then you're funding a story of someone or of an organization that you are investing in the future of whoever those people are. And it's a completely different way of looking at it. And you start shaping the future of what those people stand for, right? I'm going to ask a question that I'm sure a lot of people are wondering. And I'm wondering myself, just because every place has a different reality and every place does have different challenges in this context of human trafficking. In the context of what you're talking about, and just so I can understand it, what are they trafficked for?
Yeah, I would say so. Thailand is still a huge hub of sex tourism and sort of sex trafficking, both for international folks coming here, but also, there's a strong local market for purchasing sex. And unfortunately, that is still true of child sex trafficking. There's also a good amount of labor trafficking. So both Thais trafficked to... There was a pretty famous case of some Thais trafficked to the US for labor, places like Dubai, Australia, Korea, but also Thailand is we call it like a destination country for trafficking. So especially neighboring countries that are, less developed, people either migrate here or are trafficked here for working in agriculture, construction, fishing. Probably 5-6 years ago, a huge study came out showing that, there was a huge amount of trafficking in the fishing industry in supply chains for companies like Walmart, Costco, Tesco. Yeah,
really?
Big kind of global.
And do they know?
Global supply chains. Yes. And I will say the government has done a good job on making significant moves to improve and fight trafficking and fishing. It's fishing and seafood processing, because there's a good amount of really cheap seafood that goes into pet food also, not just, for human consumption, but pet food and things like that. And then something that's popped up in the last 2 to 3 years, so very recent. We're calling it forced criminality, trafficking into forced criminality. So a brand new form of trafficking that's happening mostly in Myanmar, Laos, and Cambodia, where people are physically trafficked. They're recruited online. So you see a fake job advertisement, although you don't know it's fake at the time, that says, come and work in Thailand or come and work in Cambodia. You can make whatever amount of money. For a Thai, let's say it's $1,000 a month, which is, a huge amount of money. All your expenses are paid for. All you need to do is work from your phone. And so we're seeing people from around the world. So India, Uganda, Indonesia, Philippines are very common, trafficked to Thailand or Cambodia. And then they're trafficked over the borders, or Thais are trafficked over the borders as well, into physical compounds that are being run largely by Chinese crime syndicates, where people are forced to do scams. So I'm sure you get the calls and the texts. We get them. I get a couple a week here. We want to call you about your TikTok account, or I'm calling from the bank, or you have a package that hasn't been delivered. Or they try to do, it's called pig butchering. So where you develop a relationship with somebody online and then essentially get money from them. So that would be like kind of a longer con.
But children have the ability to do that? I don't even understand why would they be getting children?
Yeah.
Do children even know?
Adults and young people. So from about 18 on, we're not seeing as many children in this. That's happening all in the borders. And when you don't meet your quota, there's a huge amount of violence and torture that's happening with people. People are then sold if you end up not being a very good scammer, your traffickers will kind of sell you into the sex trade in those kind of areas. So that's been a huge new form of trafficking that's been really difficult for the anti-trafficking sector in Southeast Asia to figure out how to combat, because it's a very complicated new form of trafficking.
So understanding about Freedom Story, because I understand the prevention side of things, because obviously the more you educate, the more you provide that stability for young people, they are less vulnerable. I mean, they are less able to be scammed into something like this, right? So that makes complete sense. You must work very closely then with the police, or do you work very closely with other entities that then allow because prevention is one thing, but if, for example, you're working with a community and you're aware of somebody that is potentially being abducted, or someone who is very vulnerable, and you can see what's about to happen, do you step in? I mean, at what point do you stop and then hand over? I'm just curious. Yeah, where does Freedom Story stop?
Yeah. I would say we do and we don't, but we work in collaboration with a wide network of other organizations and government and regional organizations as well, because we recognize that while we're focused on prevention, there are still people currently being trafficked and exploited who need aftercare services or who need help getting themselves out of those situations. So we have partner organizations that work on the aftercare side, or we work with the police, we work with the local government. And it's interesting because we're prevention focused, we have the opportunity to work with, a wide variety of government branches, from public health to, the Ministry of Human Development and Social Security to the police or the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force. So it's quite a wide variety, recognizing that, we're just trying to build a net to hold underneath people, and then to hopefully all together be able to catch people. And by each of us doing our role, that is really what can help.
What excites you every day with the work that you do?
Very easy to get overwhelmed, right? There's like an estimate of, 50 million people or something globally that are in trafficking situations. And sometimes I sit there and I think, why do we even bother, right? Because it's just so many people and there's so much that has to be done. But then I remember, it's going to sound really corny, but I remember the kids that we worked with, like Kat, who, we've had like 470 kids come through the program as scholars, and many of them are with us for 5 to 8 years. So they're with us for a good long time. And because I'm based here, I have the incredible privilege of knowing a lot of them quite well, or at least having seen many of them grow up over time. And just knowing that, they have so much more opportunity and they have so much more potential and so much more access to these bright and beautiful futures, just because of the opportunities we've been able to provide, right? And we always say we're there with open hands, and they take the opportunity that's been given. They do so much work, so much, they're the ones doing their homework, showing up to school, like fighting the good fight for themselves. And we're just there to kind of support them on that journey. I think another thing that's really exciting that we've started to do in the last year or two is work with even smaller groups of organizations or networks to equip them to do trafficking in their own communities. So whether that's small organizations that are based even more kind of in the community, even more locally, or networks of churches or teachers unions or networks of schools, or Thailand has a wonderful village health volunteer, network that's run with the government, that they go into each and every home in the village that they're responsible for. So equipping those people to be preventing trafficking and be kind of frontline defenders for vulnerable children in their community in order to kind of reach more kids, right? There's only so much we can do as Freedom Story, but we can really equip a network of people that can really, almost in the US, I think we have like a neighborhood watch type thing, right? They can be keeping an eye on and preventing trafficking. And we're here for when they have things that come up, and we can provide that support. But just to help reach more kids and really scale more impact for prevention.
What are you working on at the moment that you'd like to share that sort of sums up your work or your mission that we're sort of talking about today?
Probably that coalition building is the thing that we're most excited about, to create this network of like-minded people that want to protect and, prevent kids from being exploited, who we can equip. We've got 15 years of lessons learned. We know what works and we know what doesn't work. If you want to protect kids in your community, we can help you skip over all the what doesn't work and cut right to what works, and really just equipping these amazing, passionate people to be able to protect kids in their community.
Is there anything that you'd like to tell our listeners that I haven't asked you, just in general?
I think the thing that I love about nonprofit work in general and anti-trafficking is that we all have a role to play, right? Everyone's passionate about different things. You might be passionate about trafficking or climate or animals or racial justice, whatever it is. I think what I love is that you have the ability to be engaged in it. And each of us go through seasons of life where you can maybe be more or less engaged in those things. But I think the thing that I always want to encourage people to is to think about what you're passionate about and how you can sustainably engage in that, right? Whether it's monthly giving or volunteering, or, if you have the thing that I always love that I think you all actually do really well is if you're a professional, let's say I feel like this is always the example, but if you're a graphic designer, you don't need to necessarily, you can, but you don't have to volunteer at the soup kitchen. You could reach out to the soup kitchen and say, I can come and cook soup for you guys, but I could also help you with any graphic design needs that you have. And by providing and using kind of your professional skill set, I know it might feel like work more than, making soup. I don't know, but you can often really help them so that they're not having to do it themselves, or they're not having to kind of struggle with it themselves. I think I always use that example because I'm not very graphic design minded.
Come and help Freedom Story.
It takes me 3 times as long to do something half as well as it would take a graphic designer, even with Canva. So, that's kind of what I always think is people have these professional skill sets, and it's often something that nonprofits need. So,
no, definitely. I mean, gosh, we're huge believers in it, because it's also using your skill set in a completely different environment, getting your head around challenges in a way that you probably wouldn't be able to do as a designer working in an ad agency, for example. We've had so many designers actually who have been involved with our programs. One of the most, I talk about it in my book actually, Trevor, who was a designer working at an ad agency in New York. And he ended up going to Malawi, and he was on the ground in Malawi, and it was about fuel-efficient stoves, and they needed to get fuel-efficient stoves into the hands of local people. And before he got involved, I think 500 stoves were sold in 2 years. And after 30 days working with the organization, because yes, he did design stuff, but he also had the opportunity to really work closely with the organization and understand about the strategy and figure out what could be done from a strategic point of view to get these stoves into the hands of people. And he just saw things from a different point of view because he works in the private sector in advertising, working with Nike and big brands. People at the organization there are unbelievably good in the international development area. But when it comes to getting messages out to people and having them respond, it's harder because it's just not, the skill set is different, right? And at the end of 30 days, there were 10,000 stoves in the hands of people. And it just, that's the power of just different worlds coming together to solve a problem. And so yes, I actually am a huge believer in using your skills in a different environment, because you get a lot out of it and the organizations do too. So I think we've come to the end. Actually, I'm just a very quick question. Do you speak Thai? Have you picked up the language?
I do.
Do you?
I do. Yeah. Which is crazy. Yeah.
Wow. That is crazy. I can count up to 10. Still.
Okay. That's impressive.
I can do that. And tell me if I'm actually correct, because I can't remember. Nung song sam sip ha.
Yeah.
Ok jet bad cow si.
Sip. Yeah. Yeah.
Sip. Yeah. Okay. So I can still remember. So that's cool. And I can say kopkun ka, obviously. Sawati ka. I think that's it. So yeah, but I'm impressed because I was only there for 6 months, but I mean the script and everything. So yeah, that's a hard language to learn. So that's amazing. Wow.
It's been fun. It's been a fun, it's tonal. So I say something wrong every day. I've been very mosquito. And of course, what I mean to say is I've been very busy, but everyone, everyone's a good sport about it.
What is the one? I think it's cow, or something like that. There's it's like
rice, mountain, me, and them, depending on the tone.
It's extraordinary. Lucy, it's been so great to meet you and to talk more about your work. These podcasts are amazing because they're just a really great way of just getting people knowing about the work that organizations do and hopefully get the word out there so people can find interesting ways to partner. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. This is a great conversation, so I really appreciate it.
Good. Take care. Thank you, Lucy.
Bye.
Hey everyone, this is Philippa again. I hope you enjoyed listening. Now this is your chance to get involved with TIE. If you're looking to create better leaders, better companies, and a better world, that's just what we do by helping leaders tap into their greatest asset, their humanity. We have a number of corporate programs that impact a range of people, from individuals at a company to 500 people around a business. Or check out my book, Return on Humanity, Leadership Lessons from All Corners of the World. You'll find the answers to how business can truly become a positive force while remaining at the forefront of competition. You can find all the information you need on all of this at thaileadership.com. Get in touch and I can explain more. A huge thanks to Behena Vieira for co-producing this with me and for creating the music. I hope we'll meet up again soon.